parents, guardians and students to the Emmanuel College Morrisby Parent Information Night. Before I do a few introductions, I would just like to start with prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. Almighty and everlasting God, we pray that you support all students in the right direction as they search for a career. Please align them all with your plan. Fill them with the values and convictions that will equip them for their career, particularly when feeling doubtful or lost on this career journey, and remind them of your never-ending presence. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And also the acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Emmanuel College acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. As I said previously, welcome one and all to the annual Emmanuel College Morrisby Parent Information Night. In attendance tonight, we have Nicole Allen. Nicole is the Deputy Principal of Teaching and Learning at Emmanuel College. We also have the wonderful Barry Darnell. Barry is our Morrisby representative who will be talking to everyone here tonight in some detail about the Morrisby profile. And of course, there is myself. My name is Prue Warren and I am the Careers Counsellor at the St Paul's campus. Unfortunately, this evening, Sol DiMaggio, the Careers Counsellor at the Notre Dame campus, cannot be with us this evening. I would like to start off with just a few brief details. First of all, why is Emmanuel College using the Morrisby profile? Obviously, it is to assist students. As mentioned, Barry will talk to you in more detail about what the Morrisby is and what is involved in the Morrisby. But I just wanted to, I suppose, introduce it in a more general way and just let everyone know that obviously we are using it to assist students to make informed decisions linked to their post-secondary school pathways, to also select subjects in line with their interests and skills, and to make informed choices and connections between school and post-secondary pathways. It's a source of motivation as well. Parents, guardians and students, just to give you a little bit of an insight into the timeline of events as they are coming up towards the end of term 2, but also into term 3. In week 8 at both SPC campus and NDC campus, the Morrisby profile is going to be administered. So what I mean by that is that during week 8 at both campuses, there is a one-day Year 10 work education program that will be implemented for all Year 10 students. And as a part of that day, the students will be completing the Morrisby profile. That is in amongst other careers-related activities, for example, resume writing and interview skills, amongst other things. Moving into term 3, really the date is still to be confirmed. However, the timeline really runs in a sense that very early on, around about week 1, students will be spoken to about their subject selection and the choices that they need to make. And as a part of that, every student will receive a VCE planning exercises booklet. So they will start to complete the activities within that booklet around about week 1 of term 3. One of the many planning exercises in the booklet is a reflection on the Morrisby profile. So after the Morrisby is administered in week 8, the Morrisby profile will be released to all students who can view their comprehensive report online. In weeks 2 and 3 of term 3, students will need to continue to complete the variety of planning exercises within their VCE planning exercises booklet. And we really do encourage parents and guardians to have subject selection and careers conversations at home. There is also a VCE information evening on Monday, the 25th of July. Finally, in week 4 of term 3, That is when students need to make sure that they have completed all of the planning exercises in their VCE planning exercise booklets. And on Friday, the 5th of August, every Year 10 student will have a one-on-one subject selection interview with a college leader. And that will help them to make final decisions regarding their VCE or VCAL program for the following year, including subjects if they've decided to continue and complete VCE. So that's just a little bit of a timeline of events. Overall, as the Careers Counsellor at SPC and on behalf of SOL at NDC, we'd really like to encourage parents and guardians to read through your child's Morrisby profile report online after it's released. Students will log in using a password that they create on the day that they complete the profile. So you can simply ask them to log in and you'll be able to view their comprehensive report as well. We would really also like to encourage careers conversations to happen at home. We want those careers conversations to be in line with your child's interests and skills, and perhaps, you know, bringing up things such as the changing nature of the world of work. So those conversations between parents, guardians and students or children at home are going to be really important in the lead up to subject selection in term 3, as well as obviously completing the VCE planning exercises booklet. And of course, just to make it very, very clear, as the Careers Counsellor at SPC and on behalf of Mr. DiMaggio at NDC, we are obviously here to support you as parents and guardians and also your child through this process. So what I'm going to do now is just stop sharing my screen, and I'm actually going to hand over now to Barry Darnell, who is our Morrisby rep, and he's going to talk to you in quite a bit more detail about the Morrisby profile itself. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks, Prue, and thanks everyone for taking time out of an evening to come and listen to about Morrisby. Morrisby is a strange word for a careers product, but it actually comes from John Morrisby, who developed the model behind it. And Morrisby is actually a First Fleet family, and the product was first developed in the 1950s in WA with the armed forces there. And what really it is a multidimensional view of an individual generating career suggestions. The results are presented in 3 panes. About me, and I'll go through these. About me is what the students tell us about themselves by completing a number of timed exercises and untimed questionnaires. Morrisby then blend that data to make suggestions, and they are suggestions, they're not a list to choose from, about careers that might interest them, school subjects, including, I'm not sure where it'll happen by the time you get your results, but the new VCE vocational major replacing the VCAL qualification. As soon as you get the go-ahead from the DET, we'll be putting that data in. And destinations, what you do in a broader sense, rather than simply picking a career. And there's also information in here we won't touch on much tonight around progress, where students can use this system to build an action plan and set goals for career decision making. Now, I'm going to tell you something about the system now. This is being recorded so it can be watched again. There are also some videos floating around which go into things in more detail. And there's also, if I go to my website, careeranalyst.com.au, there's a page for students and parents. So if we go into that, it will allow you to have a look at a sample report, a PDF version, to complete the practice questions, and all the students should be doing that so they know what the assessments are like, and some FAQs about what Morrisby is. And just building on what Prue mentioned, we do have something here about future work predictions. So we're in a time of change. Shock horror, everybody knows this. But with careers, it's been going on for quite a while. You know, there's all these predictions that people will have 17 different jobs and 5 different careers in their life. How do you get to these figures? I don't know. They're generalizations and some data behind it. But what we do know is that working futures are more likely to be around seizing opportunity and recognizing your strengths and adapting them to opportunities as they arise. So I'm not a fisherman, but there's a lovely analogy where we can either give people a fish or we can teach them to fish. If you teach them to fish, they can look after themselves for life. And that's what careers guidance and careers education is now. It's not an event where somebody sits down and with their magic wand puts a sorting hat on you and you go off and do a career. It's something where you learn a bit about yourself and get practice in reflecting on your strengths and learn the skills and knowledge required to adapt those strengths to the future. So there's a lot of things here, a whole bunch of videos and links to Australian information about the future of work. All right, back to the profile. So what's going to happen is they're going to sit down and they're going to be prepared for this, and they'll go through 100 minutes of hard work, 85 minutes of which will be completing 5 different aptitudes. Now, these are all timed, and there are 2 versions of the verbal, 2 of the numerical, 2 of the abstract. And these 3 are looking at theoretical problem solving. Do you solve problems better when they're presented to you in words, numbers, or pictures and diagrams? And there are also a couple of assessments, again timed, which are looking at practical ability. And these 2 together talk about how practically oriented somebody is in their life and in their preference for learning, as well as a few other things. Now, 85 minutes is a fair amount of time to get information on 5 bars. So I'm going to spend 5 minutes just going through these in more detail. And I want to just pull up a PowerPoint presentation which outlines some of the stereotype profile shapes. There are a lot of different shapes, but these are the classics. One of the easy ones to work with is where someone's verbal reasoning is stronger than their numerical and abstract reasoning. So it's a bit like being left and right-handed. You might be okay with your left hand, but if you're actually right-handed, you prefer to use that right hand. It would be natural, it would be easier for you, and you're likely to pick up and do things better using your preferred hand than your non-preferred hand. So it is with a profile like this. They're likely to engage and thrive in learning and careers which require verbal strength. That doesn't necessarily mean speaking, because all of these are written exercises, but it might be speaking as well. And there are some assessments which I'll very quickly go through so you know the kind of items that the students are going through. And as I mentioned, there are practice questions, take about 10 minutes, really good if students can do that. So the verbal ones, here we have a number of items. You have to work out the similarities and differences, and then work out one from the bottom that fits in. And these are all bits of furniture. And in the second one, there is a series. So you have to understand the vocabulary and work out, using verbal reasoning, what comes next. Then there are a couple of numerical reasonings. Oh, I jumped one. In this one, there's a number series. And in this one, there's a grid with a corner number missing. Now, to get 100% in these numerical reasoning assessments, you don't need anything other than to be able to add up, subtract, divide, multiply. So there's really no maths in this, but there is quantitative thinking. And if I go back to this pattern, someone with a dominant quantitative thinking or numerical would have this kind of profile shape. And they are suited to 2 broad areas. One area is something in the broad commercial world, as well as things like logistics and transportation and things like that, where people might be looking at spreadsheets, they might be thinking in numbers. So you find that in the finance world. The other area suited to this style of individual is not commercial, and they might hate maths. Instead, they're more organisational. So there's something about this profile shape that attracts people to careers which are around structure, organisation, putting in place systems and processes and methods. So that could be anybody, anything from logistics and transport to areas of construction, but you might find somebody going into childcare with a profile like that. They'd be the person who coordinating and organising and making sure things are streamlined. Whereas the person with the weaker numerical comparatively would be the classic service to people profile, where their focus and interest would be on providing a service to others. So one profile shape doesn't suit a person to one particular career. You can have whole groups of careers fitting a particular shape. And equally, you can have several profile shapes which allow someone to do a career successfully, but approaching it in different ways. So I'm introducing some complexity here, really saying there's not a one-to-one relationship between a profile shape and a particular career. It's much broader than that. So I will just show you the abstract reasoning as well. Now, this is patterns and diagrams, basically. In this one, they have to work out what's going on in the top 5 and find the next one in the pattern from the bottom. Here, the hypothesis normally starts off with 2 squares in a bigger square. That's my hypothesis. The next one, 2 circles in a bigger circle. Okay, that's proved. But then it breaks down and you realise it's just about having 2 overlapping shapes which are the same. So the answer is the last one here. Now, in doing that, people are actually focused on the pictures themselves. They're learning based on, and problem solving based on their ability to see the differences between visual cues or pictures. The second one is also non-visual, but it's not actually looking at the pictures themselves, it's the underlying patterns, where the white dots build up and turn into black dots. Obviously, that's the correct answer. So these two are all about understanding information.
हम नहीं जानते हैं कि कैसे करना.
Dana, could you just mute if you wouldn't mind? Thanks. So with these two, the abstracts, what it's suggesting is that if someone has got a relative strength in understanding information presented in pictures and diagrams, they're likely to be suited to careers in science, technical engineering, and if numerical is low, it would be the design area. If numerical was high, it would be sort of IT, science, engineering, etc. So this essentially is the model. Now, we might come back to this in questions, but for now, I just wanted to go back and point out that there's a lot of science behind these. And there is a description, personalised, that suggests the kind of area that that pattern suits the individual to, in Morrisby's view. Now, a couple more things to say. Firstly, you don't have to believe this. This is a hypothesis about somebody's strengths. And it can happen that things go wrong in the assessment process. Maybe someone got the wrong end of a stick in terms of how to solve the problems because they didn't do the practice questions. Maybe somebody got interrupted or didn't feel well on the day. So this is not set in stone. It's a reliable and valid measure, but it's also a snapshot in time. So if your child comes back and says, oh, I messed that one up, what do? Well, just ask Prue or Sol to reset the assessment or the assessments. They can go in and your child can go through any or all of the assessments again within discussion. Nothing wrong with that at all. And it's all part of a package, so there's no cost. They can just redo it anytime they want. The second thing I'd say is that don't think we're over-interpreting small differences. We're very cautious not to. So the darker oval at the end is an estimate of what's called the standard error of measurement. Statistics speak to say, can we believe that one score is actually stronger than another? And where the two ovals don't overlap, as with verbal and abstract, we're more than 95% confident that the scores are truly different. And yes, if something bizarre had gone wrong and the assessment didn't reflect the person, that might be wrong. But all things considered, we probably think that's correct. But the numerical and the abstract, we have an overlap. So we're not 95% confident that the scores are actually different. And on a different day, it might look a bit different. So all the text down here takes this error in measurement into account. There's a fuller descriptor of it here, and there's also a fuller descriptor of the aptitudes. All right, that's all I wanted to say about the, actually there's one more thing. The level of the aptitudes drive the level of the career suggestions. But there's an inherent error or issue with that because we know that aptitude scores are not a strong predictor of academic attainment. They're kind of okay, but they don't predict more than 50% of the variability in academic performance. The other 50% are down to personal study habits, motivation, quality teaching, these kind of things. So although we do suggest an academic level based on the aptitudes, don't take that too seriously. It's more about the pattern than the level. All right, moving along this bar. Secondly, we have the career interests measured by a self-report interest questionnaire, multiple choice. They say what we'd like to do in terms of task. The longer the bar, the stronger the interest, and you can go into a lot more detail if you want. So this person's more interested in people, and then in advising and helping. It looks like training and well-being. Maybe medical would also interest them, but it looks like training and well-being most. And students can retake this as many times as they want. So if it doesn't feel right, if you want to go through with a different mindset, feel free. Two other tabs come from the interest questionnaire. So if you recomplete interest or you complete interests, work style and workplace also change. Here we're talking about work style, including entrepreneurship, and then we're talking about workplace. Final thing that's collected during the assessment process is information on personal style or personality. There are 4 scales here. The longer the bar, one way or the other side of that centre point, the stronger the preference to work in that way. So this isn't about strength or ability, it's about preference. And there are 81 short descriptors. This person's got the pragmatist, with a few summary words, which are quite useful if you want to sell yourself in a curriculum vitae or a resume, and a bigger text description down below, and you can retake it anytime you want. Final thing coming out of the assessments is something on learning style. Now, learning style is really interesting, and most people would, or organisations would, measure learning style with a self-report questionnaire where you ask the student how they learn best. Morrisby don't do that. Instead, they pull together information from the aptitudes, the interest and the personality to derive learning style, including things like would you prefer to work with others and your focus in terms of being wide or narrow in terms of detail. So really interesting information, and I hope you find it accurate. There are 2 additional questionnaires which are not done as part of the assessment. They're looking at work values and study interests. And these can be done at any time or not at all. It's up to your child, and you might lean on them a bit to have a look at their value system, for example, and see what comes out. I would point out that study interests are different to interests. The interests are looking at task and environment that attracts the student. The study interests are looking at what would they like to study. So this can be theoretical or non-vocational. They might want to study something, how cells divide, or ancient Greek history or philosophy, or whatever they want, which are not by themselves vocational areas for many people. Right, that is about me. And I hope at this point you're thinking, wow, there's a lot there, because there is. What do Morrisby then do with it? Well, they blend it and try and be helpful. And this is my choices. We start off with a dozen career suggestions, which can be viewed in pane view, but I'm going to make it list view so we get more on the page. And the first thing you'd want to do is to check the education level feels right for your child. And you can play with this, you can change it over time. So you might look at this and think, well, actually, what would happen if I went into work? So you change this, and what you see is most of the careers are going to change. So you can change this in any way you want and get the right academic level that you think is appropriate for the family. I'll leave that where it was. The other thing you can do is you can change your suggestion focus. So what we're looking at here is Morrisby's starter for 10. They've done the blending, they've got a bit of experience at this, but maybe the student looks at this and thinks, yeah, nah. In which case, what you might do is change the underlying algorithm so that interests are a stronger component of the career suggestion. So if I turn these on, what you see is a few new careers pop in. Nothing wrong with that at all, other than, of course, you kind of ignored 85 minutes of aptitudes, but that's cool. If you're going to do that as a parent, and this is the big tip I give parents, turn that off and turn on the aptitudes to overweight the aptitudes and see how big the difference is. If there's not a big difference, it suggests that aptitudes and interests are in alignment. And that's a good thing, according to Morrisby, which means that the situation then is, well, not the broad area of what direction are you going in, it's, well, how do you find what's right for you? Because if the interests and the aptitudes are quite different, it opens up hopefully a dialogue with one of the careers advisors and with the family saying, well, why is that? And do you have interests which aren't supported by your strengths? Can you approach that career with a different mindset, with a different hat on, and achieve the same results? So your call how you work with that. You can also search for careers. We've got 650 in the database. So if you want to know how closely suited you are, say to be a doctor, just type in doctor and choose one of these. It will open up information on it. You can have a look through, look at some videos, information on academic attainment to get in, information on what the job's like, routes, where the thicker the line, the more typical the approach to that kind of work, links to read out more about it, watch videos, have a look at the main career interest sites to see if there's any careers, or we haven't got one for medicine in Seek. I think they do different things, but for other areas you'd certainly find careers listed, and then some related careers. And you can choose to favourite these if you wish. The idea behind favouriting is you come back to them in the future in a couple of years and think, what was I thinking last year? And you can favourite from here as well. So another thing you could do is you could search for, not a job, you could search for a career area. So you might say, I want to do something in the health sciences. So you get something in healthcare. And this would list all the careers we have in that broad area. In this case, I don't know how many we've got, quite a lot. Show more, get 60 plus down here. I'll just point out that with these, you could choose to filter the careers either by careers which can be done in a sustainable or green manner, or which have a bright future according to the Australian skills list, which is an annual publication. So if we 69 here, if we click on those for bright future, it pulls down to 25, which are thought to have a bright future. Now, any careers advisor would say, don't take that too seriously. Do something you're good at rather than try and pick a winner, because you've got to do it for 40 years and you want to enjoy what you do. But it's often quite interesting to think, well, if we're a betting person and I've got two options, which one do I go for? One in a declining industry or one in a bright future? And that could be a discussion to have. So a lot going on this page. And what we want initially is not for students to see something they like and say, decision made, I'm going to do that. What we want them to do is to think, well, that's my top option, but what else is there? What is there out there that I haven't come across yet that might suit me in different ways? And that, to me, is always the best thing, to think about possibilities before you start narrowing down. Now, I won't speak for much longer, so I want time for questions, but we're doing this really now for subject selection. It's got much broader uses, but it's been done for subject selection. So what you have here is a list of subjects offered within Emmanuel, rank ordered according to the suitability to the individual. And there's descriptions of these. I want to put a couple of caveats here. One is that this is not an intelligent subject selection system. We don't take into account duplicates. So you could unite biology, PE, health and human development, sport and rec, all next to each other. And no one's going to say, be that narrow in your view. We're also not forcing English and English or maths in the top few. So what this is doing is helping you think about subjects which might suit you and be useful for the kind of things you might enjoy and be good at doing. And you can go through and say, I fancy that, I don't fancy that, etc. Final thing I'm going to say is under destinations, options at 18, this is a broader view of career. When we were looking at the careers, they were all individual careers, a title you could search for in a job search engine. What we have here is something broader. So if we look at hospital sciences, for example, we're looking at not a specific career, but a whole bag of careers where there's one entry point. So this is an overview of that general area, the destinations, including shortage areas, degree requirements, and then we look at the specialisms you might take within that broad area, and resource links and related subjects. So the idea behind this is to allow people to either start with a job title or a broader career area. And quite often in education now, we're getting into a situation where you start in a broader area, study a bit of everything in the first year, and then start specialising. This would allow you to do that. And when I showed you under About Me the study interests, this data, it's an additional questionnaire, takes about 8 or 9 minutes to do, that feeds in to this data. So this is based on aptitude, interest, personality, and study interest. Now, I think you can probably tell I'm enthusiastic about this. I love it. Last thing I'm going to say before questions is under Locker, there's a spot where students can upload anything they want. And this can be a place like an e-portfolio where everything careers related can go in one place. And Morrisby access is for life, as long as you log in every 5 years. So anything you put in here will stay with you past school. I'll stop talking. Questions or comments? So we're asking people to chuck questions in the Q&A or, yep.
So feel free to unmute and ask a question, or if you would prefer, you can write it into the chat and we'll have a look there.
Also, at the conclusion of tonight, parents and guardians, I will put up the contact details for both myself and Sol DiMaggio at the NDC campus, if you'd prefer to have a little bit of a think about things and send an email to us so we can help you.
Just a question in terms of, have you guys reviewed the outcome or some previous students versus what Morrisby has recommended? Has it been pretty close?
Well, it's really interesting. It's harder and harder to do that now with privacy, because we can't get hold of students 10 years on in the way you could 20 years ago. But historically, there were two quite decent sized studies, both about 5 schools, like 500-600 students. And both showed about 85% ended up in one of the 12 careers listed. And the issue with that kind of research data is that it's very difficult to know if people ended up in the career they wanted. Like, everybody might want to be a sports scientist. There aren't that many jobs around, to be honest. So what do people end up doing, and how close is that to their strengths? So I think the answer to your question is that we're not doing this to pick the winner. That's a bonus. We're doing this for the data to be helpful in career decision making. And you can get more scientific and technical in the prediction, but we don't know if there's going to be a recession coming. We don't know what kind of new careers will come in. So all these things mean that the actual numbers become less important than the value add in a counselling process. So it's not a cop-out, it's true. I'm hanging my hat on the fact that this will be helpful in the decision-making process. And I've been doing this for 19 years now. And before that, I worked in occupational psychology, and I was working for Morrisby since 1989, on and off, writing text. So I've met a lot of people who've done it, whose kids have done it, whose 4 kids have all done it. And all the feedback, pretty much, well, not all of it, but the bulk of it is, I'm glad we did that. That's worthwhile. And quite often they say it pegged them perfectly. And I like that. But I'm kind of more impressed when someone said it raised some interesting questions for us.
Barry, there's a question about whether or not the Morrisby testing allows for neurodiverse students and students who might have challenges understanding and answering the questions, how the test supports them.
It's really interesting. I mean, Asperger's, or what, not call that now, but high functioning autism. It's interesting just how good the aptitudes seem to work, how well the aptitudes seem to work, and surprisingly how well the personality works. But the interests often don't work particularly well with that group. I would say it's very, very individual. And I think the systems like this, they're group tests of general ability, technically, plus a few things hanging off that. And they're not the same as something a clinical psychologist would do. They're not measuring the same kind of stuff. So I think if you are neurologically diverse, you need to get what you can from it, but don't necessarily expect all of it to work as well as it would for somebody who is less complex neurologically.
Sorry, Barry. I'll let you finish.
I finished.
I was just going to say, in terms of the logistics of sitting the test, on the day that the Year 10s are sitting it, we'll have our learning support officers present to assist students, and particularly those students who we know are, one of our inclusion students, to sit the test and make sure they understand exactly what they have to do. So there will be support in place for them.
Yeah, I did see a question in the chat there about kind of asking about choosing a higher education course at a specific university. And I know Prue's answered that, but I just want to put my take on it, which is we could easily put in a search engine on Morrisby, but there are other places that probably do that better and they specialise in it. And we'd hate to get it wrong or for the information to be outdated. So my view is you take what you can from Morrisby, and then you get your little shortlist and you go off and use one of the other search engines to choose a specific course. That's what I would suggest.
So can I just ask, if your child has a specific career in mind and they do the testing and it points them in another direction, but they're adamant they want to do the career that they think, does the school intervene in the subject selection, or are they just, is it just left for them and the parents to decide?
Do you want to answer that one, Prue? Or yeah?
Yes, I will. Look, it happens. At the end of the day, by no means does the school intervene. I mean, I would say every year I get a number of students who really want to do something and it doesn't necessarily align with the Morrisby, in amongst other things. It's one of those things where I think where, you know, parents and guardians in their conversations with their child, just, you know, I never want to kill a dream. I'm always very open about that. And I think it just comes down to, you know, really talking it through with your child. And obviously that's a part of my job as well. But at the end of the day, if they really, really want to do something, whether it aligns or not, they're probably going to want to go ahead and do it anyway.
And when, you know, we're not a selective school, so we certainly wouldn't, you know, channel students into selecting subjects specifically because they might do better in those subjects than others. But having said all that, there is really significant support provided for them to select their subjects too. As Prue mentioned at the beginning, there is a day where we have one-on-one counselling, so where the students sit down and go through their subject selection booklet, and there's a whole lot of unpacking of Morrisby and other activities that they do beforehand, and then they sit down with the leader one-on-one and go through the things, the subjects they've selected. The leader will look at their past performance on reports and other data that we have as well, and talk through the you know, the positive or otherwise, positivity or otherwise of the selections that the students have made before they actually input that data into the subject selection portal. So there is quite a bit of support for the students as well.
There was a question in the chat referred to as a test, as it implies pass or fail. We call them assessments, but since the early 1900s, these have been actually called tests. And no one's worried about it. So, because I've been in the industry for 40 years, I occasionally slip in the odd word test. But it's called the Morrisby Profile, and they're full of assessments and questionnaires. And during the administration process, the advice is to point out there's no pass or fail, but it is a performance event, and students should approach each assessment with full attention. But reality, of course, behind that is that there are comparisons with others within this, in the same way pretty much anything you do in school or in university does require attainment. One of the big things of this is it's not measuring in any sense learned knowledge, a tiny bit of vocabulary maybe, but it's looking at underlying potential to solve problems presented in different ways. It's comparatively complex, and yeah, we're moving away from using test, but I don't think a test was ever a pass or fail. It was always a performance-based event where the intention was to do as well as you could, unless it's a driving test or whatever. But yeah, good point.
So we've had a couple of questions about support, and one that was specific for a student. Sorry, I took that off as quickly as I could, and certainly we'll follow up on that. But there was also, sorry, I'm just going to remind myself what the question was now. No. Oh, whether or not parents were allowed to attend the one-on-one subject selection interviews, and absolutely, they're during the day, but the student and the appointment times will be communicated to the students prior to that. And so certainly, if you are able to, you'll be most welcome to come along.
And I was just going to add to that, actually, parents and carers, if because the subject selection interviews do take place during the day and you happen to be at work, if you'd prefer, you're most welcome to contact either Sol at NDC or myself at SPC. Sol and I have some meetings with parents along with their child, and obviously we're more than open to meeting with you one-on-one.
Prue, there's a question about when the results are able to be accessed.
Yeah, Barry, if it's okay, I might just get you to stop sharing, and I'm just going to reshare. I've seen a few messages from parents who, you know, jumped on a little late, or there's been a lot of information given, and obviously I completely understand that. So I'm just going to actually...
Just before you do, can I just say, on the homepage, if a student scrolls down to the bottom, they can add in your name and email address, and that gives you your own login to their results.
Oh, that's great.
You can use their results to do the what if scenarios on that page around careers, and they're not having to give you their password, and they can kick you out if they want to, but hopefully they won't. So that's the thing that students should be doing, inviting their parents to share their results.
Yeah, so thank you, Barry. Just in terms of the timeline of events, just for parents and carers who missed it. So the Morrisby will be completed in week 8. That's at SPC and NDC. And then Sol and I will make sure that the Morrisby reports are released to students before the school holidays. So that'll give you a good 2 weeks to log in, play around with it a little bit, because obviously there's a lot of different things that you can toggle on and off, and really try and get to grips with it as best as you can, and then use that to have a conversation with your student before we then come back into term 3. And it's quite early on, as mentioned before. Dates are still to be confirmed, but it's usually around that first week of term 3 that students will be spoken to about the subject selection process. They will be given their VCE planning exercises booklets that require them to complete a number of different activities, including a reflection on the Morrisby profile. And then going into sort of to week 2 and 3, they'll keep working on those exercises. There's the VC information evening on the 25th of July, and then in week 4, specifically on Friday the 5th of August, that is when the one-on-one subject selection interviews will take place.
So that subject selection period starts in earnest, really, in that week 8 of this term, when the students sit Morrisby and then go off to work experience and then continue on from there. There was a question, Barry, that you might help us to answer, that was about whether or not it's just Year 10s that have access to this. So we do it at Year 10, but as you mentioned before, Barry, there is ongoing access to the Morrisby test, and students can resit it, that's right, over their lifespan.
Yeah, and with that message, it was if somebody missed it because they're new to the school or whatever, then it could easily be done at any other year group. I did it when I was 29, and it changed my life, I must say, and I hear these stories quite often. So it's not just for Year 10s, but the chances are, if you're in Year 12, you might have had the chance to do it in Year 10. If not, and if you guys are okay with it, you could just do it at home and get the results, and then arrange a time to talk. So different ways you could.
Yeah, students currently in Year 12 completed it in Year 10, and so the login will be the same. So students can log back in. They can go through their Morrisby from when they completed it a couple of years ago. But if they want to retake any of the tests, then I can reset those for them.
Really good question from Leanne. Can you still access as a parent regardless of the results if a student shares or not? Now, this is why we're asking students to share. I guess there has to be a discussion about whether a parent has a right to see someone's results or not. Nicole, I don't know if that's you.
And I think that in the end that, we will certainly let students know that they can do that. But in the end, whether or not that the student does it will be up to the student and the parent to make that decision and guide the parent to guide that. So, but we will certainly make sure that the students know that they can do that and that we would recommend that they do that. So just a couple of other questions that are here. The VCVM, the new, so we mentioned VCAL before, probably you should have changed that to VCVM. There will be VCAL only for Year 12 next year. The new vocational pathway will come into place next year, and all of that information about the new VCVM will be presented at the VCE subject, the VCE information night at the start of term 3. So Prue mentioned those dates before. If students didn't get work experience, doesn't matter. They still do the Morrisby. They'll still have the benefit of that test. And because the numbers, since we made the announcement of the change to work experience, the numbers have increased slightly. They're still not anywhere near where we would have liked them. But because the numbers have increased a little bit, we have decided that for the students who remain back, that we will be able to run a reduced virtual work experience program that week. So they'll do a little bit of work experience in the week that they're still back at school if they haven't got a placement. So, so there will be some options for them as well. All right. And I think we answered that one. So we will send you a link in the next couple of days to the video for tonight. So that's how you'll be able to access it. And go for it, Prue.
Sorry, I was just going to point one out just to clarify and confirm for a parent. The VCAL vocational major that will be discussed on July the 25th. The VCE and VCAL evening.
Yeah, so it's no longer the VCE VCAL evening, it's now just the VCE evening, because the VCE VM is actually now comes under the VCE.
Yeah.
So that's what we were saying before. So if you come along on that night, you'll find out all about the new vocational pathway.
Thank you.
I'm hoping by then we'll have a new terminology in Morrisby. It's all just waiting for the Department of Education and Training to give the final go-ahead before we make the switch.
So I clarified about the work experience, sent out an email to to everyone that contacted us, clarifying about the work over work experience. It will be minimal, the work that the students do in that week. So they will now, as I said, because the numbers have increased, there will be some work done on the virtual work experience program that obviously those who are at work experience will not have to do. And for the most of the rest of the time, what the students will be doing is going over some assessments and reviewing the exam. So there will be minimal amount of work for students who are at work experience to catch up on. All right. Anything else? Have we missed anything? A few came in quickly then, so I just want to make sure we haven't missed anything. But otherwise, Prue, do you want to finish off, and I'll just make sure we haven't missed anything.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Parents and carers, thanks so much for coming along tonight and hearing us talk about the Morrisby. Obviously, Emmanuel College have been implemented Morrisby for a few years now, and I'd like to say a very special thank you to Barry, who really is the Morrisby guru. However, in saying that, parents and carers, if you haven't asked a question tonight and maybe you're reflecting and something comes to mind, please feel free to send an email to either myself or to Sol over at NDC, and we'll do our very best to support you and answer any questions that you have. Any last
Thanks
questions?
So much. Yeah, any?
No.
Lots of thanks, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here and showing such an interest in your child's future pathway.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much to Barry as well for being here. Thank you.
Bye, guys.